And to the cloud. Anyway, welcome to everybody. Glad to have you all here tonight. We have Pam Birrell, who's been a professor at U of O, and she decided that retirement wasn't a permanent issue, that it might be fun to kind of come out and share her thoughts with other people. And so we're grateful for that. Grateful for her participation in Eugene Plant-Based Providers and promoting the message. And so you're going to get a chance to hear from her shortly. Before we get started, just want to see if anybody is new in the room. If you're new, maybe you could share how you found out about the classes. And if you don't care to share, it's okay too, but we are always interested in how we can keep promoting these classes. So anybody new? And I don't see anybody raising their hand or unmuting themselves. And so you can chime in anytime during the discussion. Do you have any other thoughts, any questions before we get started? Anything that's burdened on your mind that you'd like addressed at some point tonight? And if not, you can wait till the end of the session and ask the questions then. And whatever you would like to do would be fine.
No questions to begin with?
No questions.
All right.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go get started. Pam, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself a bit more.
Okay.
And, I think those who are attending tonight will enjoy the experience. So thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Although it's a bit weird to give it right away again. So I'm going to try not to bore myself. So before I get my slides up, I will, yeah, Beth, that would be a good idea if people were muted, just so there's no.
I'm going to go ahead and I'll mute everybody here. I can do that.
Okay.
And that may even mute you. So then you'll have to.
So I have unmuted.
Wait a second. Try one more time and unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. All right. I stayed unmuted that time. Weird. It says, okay. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as Charlie said, my name is Pam Birrell. I am a retired PhD psychologist. And for much of my life, I did two jobs. I taught at the University of Oregon, and I was a therapist in private practice. And I tell the story about how I became plant-based about 15 years ago. I had a friend who really wanted me to go on a raw diet with her. And I'd never heard of a raw diet, but I thought, okay, why not? And so I began. And I spent almost a year on a raw diet. And I realized at the end of the year that I was vegan. A raw diet, you can eat things like raw meat and raw cheese and raw milk, but I thought that was pretty disgusting. So I became the inadvertent vegan. I had always been kind of vegetarian, and for a while, probably in my 40s, I was a precursor of the paleo diet. I had this theory that the way primitive people ate was that most of the time they ate nuts and berries, and every once in a while they killed a mammoth. So for many years, my husband and we ate vegetarian or vegan unless we felt like we really needed our mammoth, and then we'd go out for prime rib. And we never did anything in between. And gradually our wanting the prime rib, those times moved farther and farther apart. So I was already tending very much in the vegetarian vegan direction, but having that year on a raw diet really it changed my life. I became much healthier, lost a bunch of weight, had a lot of energy. And this is not something I said last Friday, but I also had kind of a spiritual awakening after being a vegan for maybe 4 or 5 years, and really understanding that I had been defending, pardon me, I do speak like a psychologist at time, defending against the kind of guilt about what happens to animals, and knowing that I'm not a person, I could not kill an animal. I couldn't. And I couldn't take a baby cow away from its mom. And what right did I have to pay someone to do that? So I really had this kind of turnaround and just kind of internal blossoming, um, about 4 years into my vegan journey. And it made me very, very passionate about health, because my health was so improved, and about compassion for the animals. And you'll hear a lot about that today. And then, of course, we all know about climate change. So that's kind of where I started. Um, okay. You have to bear with me here. I am a little bit rusty.
I can see the PowerPoint slides just fine.
Okay. All right. So I look like I'm good now. I can
Yep.
see a few of you along the side. So I will try to keep an eye on it. So this is me and Buster. Um, I decided, as Charlie said, when I retired from the university first. I kept my private practice through the pandemic. And that nearly killed me because there was a lot of need during the pandemic. And then I retired from my private practice. And as many retired people, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I am still involved in psychology. I still teach interns at the Center for Community Counseling, but I kind of wanted something a little bit different. So I started looking around, and I had been a supporter of the farm sanctuary movement for a long time, the National Farm Sanctuary, in New York, and a branch in California. And I thought, well, maybe there's farm sanctuaries around here. So I started Googling, and I found Welcome Home Farm Sanctuary, which is a little farm just outside of Cresswell. I mean, 3 minutes outside of downtown Cresswell, that houses, somebody asked me this after the talk Friday night, houses maybe 8 to 10 goats, 5 steers, probably 10 pigs, 7 or 8 sheep, 1 alpaca, and various turkeys and chickens. And that's the denizens of Welcome Home. And so I went down there, and the first animal I met here was Buster. It turned out that the day I went down there to visit, there was another woman visiting. She actually lived in Portland. And what she wanted for her 70th birthday was to hug a cow. And so Misty, the owner of Welcome Home, brought out Buster. And Buster is named Buster because he busted in from the neighbors and stayed. And he's a little bit small because he had been neglected when he was younger. So his growth plates didn't really develop, but he's a very sweet cow. And so now I go down once or twice a week, and I have 2 volunteer jobs. One is training interns at the Center for Community Counseling, and the other is shoveling shit at Welcome Home Farm Sanctuary. So this is me and Buster. And what I'm talking about tonight is the psychological pillars of lifestyle medicine, that being stress management, the importance of sleep, and the importance of connection. You all have seen this diagram of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. So here I am covering half of them tonight. Oh, and I have a cat who might wander through, so you might meet Benjamin. So we'll begin with a mindful moment. This is me and Milo. Milo is a Holstein steer, and his brother, Romeo, who you'll see in another picture, is in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's tallest steer. He's 6'3", 6'4" at the withers, and Milo's only about an inch shorter. And we don't see male Holsteins because the males are killed at birth. They're sold for veal. In fact, Milo and Romeo were rescued from veal crates, and they're very sweet, big guys. And so that's Milo. So one of the things I stress, I think it was really, really at the heart of a lot of the pillars of lifestyle medicine. One I see is the importance of the plant-based diet. It just goes into every aspect. But the other is mindfulness. When we are mindful of our existence, when we are aware of our breathing, when we're open to the present moment just as it is, rather than off somewhere in our thoughts, whether our thoughts are anxious or depressing, whatever they are, then we have a better chance of living in wholeness. So I will emphasize connecting to the breath. So just take a couple of moments to look around your room, look at whatever room you're in, and just look around and become very, very present. I am looking at my cat, who's named Benjamin Fishstick, and you may meet him in a bit if he comes over. And just become aware of your breath. And notice perhaps the movement of air at the nostrils, cool air on the inhale, warm air on the exhale. And you might notice the movement of your chest. And rib cage. Perhaps your belly. And when you spend just a few moments in silence watching the breath often slows down on its own accord. You don't need to slow it down. But just noticing the movement of the chest, the rib cage, the belly, the feel of air inside the nose and down the throat. And then once you've had this, can find a place of silence and quiet and begin to be able to observe your thoughts rather than being carried away by your thoughts. There's a couple of tricks. And as it says here, if you feel anxious, make your exhale longer than your inhale. And so you can, for instance, inhale to the count of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale to the count of 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whatever works for you. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When we exhale, the heart rate actually slows down. You can check this on your own pulse. That on the inhale, your heart will speed up, and on the exhale, it will slow down. So by emphasizing, especially if your heart rate variance is healthy, if you exhale longer than you inhale, then the heart rate actually physically slows down. So it can be just a little nap right in the middle of a stressful situation. On the other hand, if you're tired and need a lift, do the opposite. Breathe in for 6 and out for 4. So these are just little mindfulness hints, little things that you can try. If you look on the internet, there's a famous breath called the 4-7-8 breath that was put forth by Andrew Weil, pretty famous naturopathic physician. And you can see examples of him doing so. You inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. And there's videos of that on YouTube if you're interested in pursuing this. So staying with the breath now, let's move on to stress. And I want to make 2 points here during talking about stress. The first is that not every form of stress is detrimental. In fact, sometimes stress can be healthy, depending on how we're framing it, because we have the ability to a certain extent, not totally, because I don't want to say all you need to do is think right and you won't be stressed, because some stresses are too big for that. But for many of our everyday stresses, we have the ability to manage our own stress levels. So let me talk about that a little bit more. So distress and eustress. Distress is this negative form of stress where you're just hyper arousal all the time. You get into a fight or flight kind of response. Heart rate goes up. Maybe you get butterflies in your stomach. Maybe your palms get sweaty. And under long exposure to this kind of distress, it can really have mental and physical health issues. But there's another form of stress called eustress, which can be motivating and energizing. And I use the example of the violin string. So if you've ever seen a violin or been around a violin, if you have the strings tightened too much, first of all, they'll break. But second of all, short of breaking, if the string is pulled too tight, it makes a loud squawking sound. It's just, it literally will hurt your ears. So that's distress. But if you loosen the string too much, then it just lies there on the violin and you can't make music with it. So eustress is where you pull the violin string just to that point where there's enough stress on it that can make beautiful music. And that's the way we are too. I find giving this talk and working with Eugene plant-based providers stressful to a certain extent. I have to do work I don't want to do. I always get nervous before I give a talk. I always notice my mind going off. And so it's stressful, but it's eustress because it's a stress that motivates me to learn things. It energizes me. What I say to people is, I have this inner psychology professor personality that comes out, and she loves to get out here and talk. So even though it's stressful, it's a eustress. It's one that I learn and I grow from. The other thing I've done a lot in my life is was for a while a professional flute player, and I love to play the flute. And I can practice scales. I used to be able to practice scales for hours and hours, and that was stressful to a point and kind of boring, but it made me a much better player. So these are the two kinds of stress. So here's some examples. Distress, if you have prolonged work-related pressure, financial difficulties, chronic health issues, you lose a job, you have a serious injury, then that's distress. But eustress, which is one we don't talk about a lot, achieving a goal or an accomplishment, starting a new job, the excitement of a roller coaster ride or a fun challenge, a tough workout. I think that's a really good example. I'm doing a very silly thing for someone my age because I'm almost 79, is I'm taking a yoga teacher training. And it's really tough. And I am by far the oldest person in the room. And I'm not sure that I will ever do a headstand in this lifetime, but I'm working on headstand. And it's very stressful and it's really tough and it's really wonderful. It's really a great experience. So that's an example of eustress. So which is which? And some cases are clear. If you've, broken your leg, if your house is burned down, if there's too much work for you to keep up on, there's some is just clear. But what I want to emphasize tonight, in many cases of these middling kinds of stresses, like giving a talk or having to deal with your in-laws or whatever is the kind of, having to deal with taxes, all of that kind of thing. How we think about it can determine whether it's good or bad stress. It's really an internal thing. And I love these examples of psychological studies that have been done because I'm a psychologist and the power of the mind. And the first one is a study that was done with motel maids who have a pretty pretty hard job. If any of you have ever worked as a motel maid, I haven't. I have enough trouble making my own bed, but it's a hard job. And these women were brought in, and in this particular case, they were all women. And they were given a questionnaire about their job satisfaction and how much exercise they got and all of this stuff. And to a person, they said basically that, they worked all the time. They didn't get much exercise. They didn't, they found their job pretty stressful. And so after that, for half of the participants, the experimenters gave them a brochure which told them about the number of calories you burn when you make a bed, the number of calories you burn, and the good exercise when you clean a tub. And so half of the participants began to think of their job as exercise. And the other half were just given tips on their job. And what they found out is after, I think it was 3 months, that those women who had just been told that their job was good exercise lost weight, whereas the other group didn't lose any weight, and they lowered their blood pressure. And the only intervention was, hey, guess what? You're getting exercise at your job. And so often when I'm working at the farm, because it can be really hard, especially in the winter and it's muddy and the straw, I shovel shit, I clean out stalls and can be really heavy. And I will say to the other volunteers, some people pay to go to gyms to get this kind of exercise. I have very excellent intercostal muscles in my ribs right now because I do a lot of raking of heavy things. So just how you think about it. Do you think about, oh, this is terrible? Or do you think, and sometimes I'll have to say at the farm when I can't feel my fingers because it's so cold, it feels pretty stressful. But if I can think about it as exercise and spreading the love that I have for the animals, then it's no longer stressful. There's another experiment done with milkshakes. And in this experiment, people are brought into a laboratory and they're given the world's richest milkshake. It's touted as being really a high-end, wondrous, extremely high-fat milkshake. And then afterwards, they're asked how hungry they are. And then the next week, they're brought in to the lab and they're given a health shake that is healthy. It's got high protein and low fat. And so they drink that milkshake and then they are asked, how hungry they are after it. And we know from physiology that ghrelin is one of the hormones that tells us when we're full. And so it's a hormone, right? It operates automatically. But what they found is that when the people had been given the high-fat milkshake, they were full. But when they were given the low-fat milkshake, they weren't full. They needed more. The trick being that there was no difference in the milkshakes. They were the same milkshake. Exactly the same. So actually just believing that this was a high fat or low fat meal changed the hormone level and changed their own experience of their hunger. And also we know the power of the placebo, that we have a lot of trouble doing all the experiments, finding out whether or not antidepressants worked, because often the placebo worked as well as the experimental drug, as the antidepressant. And this is true of all the drug studies. There was one study with irritable bowel syndrome where people were told, well, we're going to give you a pill, but it's a placebo. Gave them placebo, in about 30% of the cases, their IBS improved. So we do have this the power of the mind to help deal with our stress. So to this extent, we can transform our stress into a challenge. We can say, this is good for me. I'm building my intercostal muscles, or dealing with my in-laws is stressful, but it tells me more about myself and my reactions to people. So however we want to reframe our stress can be really, really change how it affects us. The other thing has to do with our physiological state, and that is it anxiety or is it excitement? Because the physiological state, sympathetic arousal that underlies anxiety and underlies being excited is one and the same. And so you get excited, you have butterflies in your stomach. Is this because you've been a stressful thing to do, or is this because you're about to get on the world's biggest roller coaster? It's the same experience internally. So just reframing, what am I feeling? We tend to like just name our feelings. Oh, I know what I'm feeling. But sometimes we don't really know. If we can just stay with the sensation of the feeling, and we can decide, no, maybe I'm excited about this. So that's another way to, so just think about the internal state. Just don't, oh, I'm anxious. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're excited. Maybe there's something else going on. So just be more mindful about observing our internal states. Another way of dealing with stress is, of course, journaling. And I talked, I don't know, several months ago about trauma, which is my specialty as a psychologist, because trauma, of course, leads to stress, and stress and trauma are intimately related. And there were some interesting studies done in Texas where they brought college students in and asked them to write about a stressful, one half of them wrote about a stressful experience that had happened to them. The other half wrote about good study skills. So they both wrote about very different things. And 6 months later, this is at Texas Christian University, I think, they could check the records at the Student Health Center. And what they found is the students had written about their trauma 6 months later were significantly underutilizing the health center as compared to the control group who just written about whatever. So journaling can be really a very useful thing where we learn to sort of metabolize our own stress and understand it. And it's another way of becoming mindful. The other thing is that stress helps us connect with others and create community, that we reach out. I said Friday night that when I was working on the lecture on Friday, I reached out to my daughter, well, look at my slides, help me. And we often do that. So at the farm, if I'm having trouble, I can't move a cow or the goats are chasing me, then I want people to help me. And we can do that with whatever the stress is. And it's a healthy way to deal with stress, is to reach out, talk with others, create community. So this is me and Fred at the farm. Fred is about a 7 or 8 year old goat who had 2 broken legs, and his front legs are still a little funny looking when he stands up. And this is last summer when we thought he had cancer. Turned out he didn't, but he wasn't feeling good, and he let me cuddle him. And so it was a stressful time in a way because we were so worried about him, but it was also a very connecting time. So he's a character. He's my favorite goat. So before I go any further, any questions, comments? Slow down, speed up.
There's no comments in the chat.
Oh my
Now would be a
goodness.
time to speak up if anybody's has a
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
I got something I could say.
Okay.
So the other day, I figured out why people say cheer up.
Yeah.
I always thought, oh, cheer up, huh? I guess I'll just stop being sad because you said that. What a stupid thing to say. But no, the other day I was out delivering pizza. That's my job.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of flustered and I'm thinking, man, this job sucks. I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like I somehow steered my brain into thinking, I'm here on the road listening to my own music. I get to drive their truck. They pay for gas. This is actually pretty fun.
Uh-huh.
And then immediately had the realization of, whoa, How'd I do that? You can do that? That's possible?
Mm-hmm. What a perfect example. Yeah. And you cheered up?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
I wish I could I wish all my friends knew that this was possible.
it is possible. And I want to emphasize that, there's some cases of stress where it's not, where it may be too overwhelming, but I'm talking about this middle, like our job stress, like that. That's such a beautiful example. Um, when I was at the university, I can remember having 8 committee meetings in a day and thinking, oh my God, this is too much. And then I would have a class with my favorite graduate students and a wonderfully stimulating discussion, and that made it all worthwhile.
Mm.
So, yeah, thank you for that comment. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I don't know if you can see the comments in the chat room.
Nope, I can't.
Okay, so far it's been a wonderful presentation, Pam. Thank you. And
Oh,
then
all
love
right.
seeing the human-animal connections. And then can you comment on IFS for trauma work?
Oh, interesting. Okay. Um, well, that's a different lecture, but IFS means internal family systems. And basically, what it's saying is something that I think is very, very true and not that new, which is we all have parts of ourselves. Okay, did anybody ever say to themselves, oh my God, that I am so stupid? Anybody ever say that other than me?
No.
Right? So you talk to yourself, I'm so stupid, or that was stupid, or why did I do that? Who are we talking to in our brain? And when we become mindful, we realize that there are kind of these characters that live inside of us. The one that will be the most, I think the easiest to pick out is the one that's called the internal critic. And that's that voice that comes to you and says, that was stupid. Or depending on your history, you'll never amount to anything. Or my favorite example was, it was actually about a year ago or maybe longer that I was lying in bed. I woke up how you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and sometimes sleeping's one of my superpowers, but I had one of those nights where I was awake and I'm lying there and this thought comes into my mind. And what I thought was, you're just a useless old woman. And I will have to say that I laughed out loud because what a silly thought to have. But that's that sort of internal critic. So we begin to recognize this critical voice inside of ourselves. And when you can begin to recognize the other one that's a common one is the inner child. So the very emotional part or the very impulsive part. And we begin to recognize the various ways that we react to situations. And it's a way of gaining self-knowledge. It really is. I think it can be very, very useful. My experience in trauma was primarily, especially 20, 30 years ago, dealing with people who had been diagnosed with what we used to call multiple personality disorder. Now it's called dissociative identity disorder. And those people had really explicit family systems. I got to meet these characters, but all of us have them. So I think in terms of getting to know ourselves, getting to really be mindful, you have to be mindful to learn all of your parts and dealing with them in kind and compassionate ways. It can be very, very useful. Does that answer the question of whoever asked it? Is that you, Alice? Thank you. All right. So I love questions like that, by the way.
Yes, thank you. I've been really interested in, like barriers to weight loss for folks,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get them to eat more veggies because they're so filling as a way to, and then reading kind of about IFS as
Mm-hmm.
kind of, you know, what's motivating people to overeat,
Right. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can think about, I need to have that cookie as being the child part, and how might you deal with a physical child? let's have the apple first or whatever it is. Yeah, I think it can be, I often use that. Yeah. So thanks for the question. Okay. So here we have another mindful moment, and this one is just kind of a silly slide because I liked the graphic on it. Go for a walk mindfully, but not with your mind full, okay? And you might think of ways, think for a moment of the stress in your life and how you might think about it differently. Edwards was perfect. What a great job, just driving around in somebody else's truck, listening to music. Oh. Oh, this is me and Pickles. Pickles is a pig, as you can see, as you can tell. And we taught Pickles how to sit. And he's very, very smart. He's the most social pig that we have out there. And when he sees volunteers coming, he often just sits down. So they can give him, what am I giving him? I think I had apples that day. We have this thing at the farm where we get there about 10 o'clock on Wednesdays, if anybody wants to join us. And we work for an hour and a half cleaning out all the stalls, cleaning out all the pens, and then putting fresh straw down, fresh shavings down. And then we bring treats and feed the animals. And it's the funnest part of the job. So that's Pickles. Okay, so I'm going to change into sleep now. I'm going to look at what happens when we don't get enough sleep. Some of the uses of sleep and dreams. The effect of a whole food plant-based diet, and maybe some tips on how to get good sleep. So here's the other thing here that I'm going to bring up is self-care. And this goes along with mindfulness, that we need to take care of ourselves. And often when I work with people, when I'm coaching for plant-based living, as you know, I do that. I've met with, I don't know, at this point, maybe 8 or 10 people on doing on how to do plant-based living. And one of the big things I stress is self-care, and not self-care in the terms of giving yourself anything you want, like cookies and things like that, but really taking time for yourself to close the door and tell your partner or your kids that you need time away, and just claiming that time for yourself. And we on the airplanes, they say put on your own oxygen mask first, because if you're desperate for your own oxygen, you're not going to be useful to anyone else. So in order to be really successful, I think in this lifestyle, if we don't have self-care, it will not work. If we don't take that time out of the day to either become mindful or go for a walk or take a nap, then it's really going to be much more difficult for this lifestyle to work. So from there, we go to sleep deprivation. I just found this on the internet. So if you are deprived of enough sleep, you have cognitive impairment. There's memory losses, impaired moral judgment, which is an interesting one, severe yawning, of course, hallucinations, and symptoms like ADHD. Do any of you, I have this experience sometimes if I get really, really tired, I tell people that I feel like one of those tired toddlers. I'm really revved up, but I can't relax. That's kind of that ADHD kind of thing. And when I was in college, I actually got a degree in chemistry, and we had to take physics courses. And I remember pulling an all-nighter studying for a physics test. And the next day I hallucinated diffraction gratings all day. So I know the hallucination one can really happen. I never did that again. Also, sleep deprivation leads to poor immune system function, risk of diabetes type 2, irregular heart rate, heart disease. If it gets bad enough, you'll have aches and tremors and smaller reflexes. And the important other is the risk of obesity. We know from some fairly good recent studies that sleep loss, not being able to sleep, is highly related to obesity. And it probably has to do with, I don't think we really know the mechanisms, but it probably has to do with, I'm really tired, I can't think. I'm pretty sure a cookie would help, because our judgment is a bit impaired as well. So those are some of the aspects, what happens when we're deprived of sleep. And then the other aspect is dreams and dreaming. And it's really important that we get a balance in our sleep. There's 4 or 5 stages of sleep. There's light sleep, there's an intermediate sleep, there's a very deep sleep, and then there's something called REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. And that's when we dream, because we know this from experiments where people would come into the laboratory, and every time their eyes started moving, they would be waked up, and they would always report a dream. Now, there's some more recent research that shows that's not the only time that we're dreaming, but it's the time we're most likely to remember our dreams. And during that period of REM sleep, the physiology of it is very interesting, because the way the system works in the brainstem, that while you're in REM sleep, you can't move your body. Your body is paralyzed, which is probably the source of all those dreams that so many people have of being chased and not being able to move. Anybody ever have that dream? Yeah. And it's because your cortex, your frontal cortex has made up this story, but your body, you can't move. You literally can't move. And that has to be that way, because otherwise we'd act out our dreams, and that can be dangerous. But if you deprive people of this REM sleep, if you take them into the laboratory and every time their eyes start moving, you wake them up so that they don't get their REM sleep, they become pretty crazy within 3 or 4 days, really kind of psychotic, not able to regulate their emotions, a little bit of hallucination. So REM sleep is really important for a lot of reasons. I'm going to go to the second one first. The memory consolidation is that our REM sleep is used to consolidate memories of the day before. There's some really interesting studies about rats, where they took rats and they put electrodes in their brain, in the motor cortex, and they were teaching the rats to run a maze. And then during the night, and so the electrode in their brain recorded the brain impulses of running the maze. And during the night, during their REM sleep, those same cells fired. So it's as if during their sleep, they were rerunning the maze. And then, as is often the case with people and with animals, they were much better at their maze running the next day, because they'd had this REM sleep to help consolidate their dream. The dreams, the REM sleep to help consolidate that memory. So this has been a well-studied effect. Also, it has to do with emotion regulation. I love working with dreams when I was especially doing therapy, that dreams can tell us so much. I mean, Freud talked about the dream as being the royal road to the unconscious, and people can have the most amazing, I myself have had life-changing dreams, and people can have dreams of people who have just died visiting them. They can have dreams of traveling to other galaxies. You can have dreams of flying, all of these things. And often working with these dreams can be really useful. And again, back to your journal of writing about dreams and learning about dreams. And in that way, they also help with emotion regulation. And there were some interesting studies done right after the Vietnam War, that soldiers came back with extreme cases of PTSD. That's when it became a diagnosis. And they would have these nightmare repetitions of something that had happened in Vietnam, something terrible. And they would dream it over and over and over again. But when the dream started to change a little bit, and something symbolic came in, something a little bit different than what had happened in reality, then the soldiers began to feel better. They began to heal. So it can be used that way. And also, we know that dreams can be very, very creative. People solve math problems, chemistry problems. I've solved some problems in dealing with clients in my dreams, it would work out that way. So, okay. So how do we improve our sleep? I find this particularly, my search on Google, I find it fairly particularly not useful. But if you're not doing these things, you might try some of them. So establish a regular sleep schedule. Create a relaxing bedtime routine so that you're doing the same thing every night. It's sort of like, how do you train an animal, right? You're going to go through the same thing every day. So your brain, your psyche learns that, okay, a shower before bed means we're winding down. Have good sleep environment. So you want to have a dark room, you want to have a cool room, you want to have a comfortable bed, you want to have it as quiet as possible. One year I lived in an apartment that had horrible, I mean, there was this big old light in the parking lot outside. So I got a sleep mask, which kept me sane that year because I could not get my room dark enough. You want to limit stimulants. I'm one who can't have, I have 1 cup of coffee in the morning and then 1 cup of black tea, and that's about all I can do. When I was younger, I used to be able to drink a cup of coffee and take a nap, but not anymore. Engage in regular exercise. I know, and you probably learned this too, that days when you sort of exhaust yourself with exercise, the sleep is almost always better. And managing stress in the ways we've talked about. Sunlight seems to help, especially morning light and light toward the end of the afternoon. One of the ways of helping with jet lag is to get out and get early morning exposure to light and then take a walk around sunset. Of course, in the winter in Oregon, none of this applies. So we do our best. And to avoid napping. So these are all sort of things that if you haven't tried and you have trouble sleeping are a good thing to try. And have your whole food plant-based diet with lots of different fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. We know that people on plant-based diets have better sleep quality, they have less fragmented sleep, and they sleep up to 48 minutes more per night than somebody not on a plant-based diet. So improving your nutrition really, really can help. The other thing, there's a big push now for intermittent fasting. And I think this is a very individualistic thing. I know that for me, I like to eat dinner about between 4 and 5 and then go to bed about 9. I have to have 4 or 5 hours without food and then I sleep better. But I know that my daughter is the opposite. If she doesn't eat pretty soon before she goes to bed, she can't sleep. So that's one of those things that I don't think we can say there's a rule for, but you might find what works in your life. And the other goes with that first one on the previous slide of find your chronotype. And Google chronotype. It's all over the internet now. It's another big thing. I have one of these fancy rings that tells me what my chronotype is. It tells me how well I sleep every night, as if I might not know some other way. But I'm a morning type. I wasn't always. When I was in college and graduate school, I was very much an evenings type. I wanted to go to bed at 3 and get up at 11. And now I want to go to bed by 8:30 or 9 and get up at 5:30. So, but that's just, it does change over the course of a life. But if you can find that time, then it can really make a difference. I have a couple of friends, and one of them had well, I have more than a couple of friends, but I have 2 who have this strange sleep schedule. And one of them had extreme insomnia. He just couldn't sleep. It was awful until, for some reason, and this has been a while ago, he found out that if he went to bed and was asleep by 7 in the evening and got up at 3 or 4, that was his chronotype. That's what worked for him. And he no longer had trouble sleeping. And my best friend is that way too. She is in bed by 6:30 or 7 and awake at 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's their chronotype. That's just what fits them. So you may have one of those unusual kind of chronotypes. So any questions on sleep? I can see the number of things in the chat. I don't think that's changed. Is there anybody want to say anything?
About chronotypes.
Mm-hmm.
I got really into that a few years back because
Uh-huh.
I don't know, I've always had really bad insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found a support group for something called delayed sleep phase disorder.
Hmm.
And I'm like, huh, that sounds like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went in for a sleep study, and wouldn't you know it, it's not insomnia. It's I just don't sleep at the same time that everyone else does.
There you go. Yeah.
And I have been so much better,
Hmm.
like every way, since I just started. I mean, that's why I deliver pizza now, is because I can't work a nine
Mm-hmm.
to five.
Mm-hmm. I'm
But
going to turn my light
I'm
on. Yeah. Go ahead.
much happier delivering pizza and
Uh-huh.
sleeping than doing some like high level advanced engineering and not sleeping.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a perfect example. That's just who you are. I do not know how my friend raised 3 children with her sleep schedule. Um, she she managed to get to concerts and things like that, but it was hard on her. But
Edward,
no.
what hours do you sleep?
I sleep. I usually go to bed at around 4 to 5 a.m. and I wake up at
Mm-hmm.
around noon or 1 o'clock,
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
which is sleep till noon. People are just gonna say,
Mm-hmm.
oh well, you're just being lazy.
Right.
I would say I sleep 8 hours. I don't care what you say.
I think that's perfect. You're the opposite. You could not live with the other 2 people I know. You'd be going to bed at the time that they wake up, but there are these individual differences.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're intractable that way. And I'm really glad that you found what worked for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful example again. Anybody else? Before we go to what is next? Oh, yes, connection. After our next mindful moment. This is me, and there's Pickles in the background. And this is Tuve and Yebo, the 2 very, very sweet goats last summer at the farm. So here's another way to think about managing stress with breath, and that's alternate nostril breathing. As I said, I'm training to be a yoga teacher, and I've done yoga for 50 years. And there's a lot about what's called pranayama in yoga. And alternate nostril breathing is where you would close your right nostril and breathe in through the left, and then close the left and breathe out through the right. And then breathe in through the right, close the right, and breathe out through the left. And so you breathe in through the left, out through the right, in through the right, and out through the left. And I always thought, well, I kind of liked alternate nostril breathing, and you would read about how it really helped regulate the nervous system. And I always thought, well, yogis can say that, but where's the research? And it turns out, I discovered at my yoga teacher training, there is research that when you breathe through the left nostril, that this affects it. It affects the contralateral hemisphere of the brain. So it stimulates the right hemisphere, which is our more dreamy hemisphere, more located in the present moment. And if we breathe in through the right nostril, it's related to the contralateral. So the left hemisphere, which is our problem solving, get out there and do stuff hemisphere. And that's completely oversimplified, but one way to look at it. So if you're sitting in a really stressful meeting, you might kind of slowly put your finger there and breathe through their left nostril. It's very calming. Or vice versa, like we began at the beginning. If you want to get more alert, breathe through the right. And if you want to be balanced, do the alternate nostril breathing for 4 or 5 minutes can really help to regulate the nervous system and balance the energy of the brain. So what do I have next? I always wonder. Oh, connection.
Hey, Pam,
Yeah.
it looks like Meryl had an interesting question on the chat.
Okay, Meryl, what is it? Somebody can read it or Meryl can ask it.
I could ask it.
Okay, great.
I have been led to believe that having an irregular sleep schedule could impact your liver functioning. Um, and also I'm wondering about circadian rhythm. I'm wondering,
Right.
you know, yeah.
Yeah, circadian rhythm is been much more studied in animals than in humans. I actually one of my nefarious careers earlier, I actually studied circadian rhythms in sea slugs, that our nervous system gets entrained. Our system likes, like Edward was talking about, his example, if he goes to sleep at 3, he's got a good life. If he tries to go to sleep at a normal schedule, he doesn't. But it has to be consistent because our bodies work in terms of these circadian rhythms. And so our bodies like that. And to try, if we're always changing around what we're trying to do and schedules are different from day to day, people who work in, I don't know how people do this, but it does affect their health. So they might work night shift for a week and then have a few days off and then work day shift for a while, that those people have a lot of health problems because the system just can't take that. But specifically liver function, Charlie, Scott, do either of you know about that?
Well, just that having a regular sleep schedule will affect things like insulin resistance, and
Right, true, yeah.
it would just be, get, like you were saying, just bad for your health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meryl, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, all right, all right. So get on that regular sleep schedule if you can. All right, so I'm going to look at some different kinds of connections: social connection, connection with yourself and your body, connection with the natural world, and then connection with something larger than yourself. So I'm going to begin with talking about the rabbit effect. There's a book that's called The Rabbit Effect. This is an experiment that was done actually in the 80s, and the book was just written recently. So turns out with rabbits, if you give them a high-fat, high cholesterol diet, then they get high cholesterol and their blood vessels are damaged. No surprise to anyone. At the time, they were trying to learn this so they could use rabbits as a model for studying heart disease. But the rabbits in this particular lab were at different levels. So the cages were at different levels. Some were about at waist level, chest level, and some of them were up higher. And what they found after the rabbits they'd given them this high cholesterol diet for a while, what they found out is that all the rabbits had high cholesterol, but not all of them had blood vessel damage at all. There was a real difference, and they couldn't understand why are some of the rabbits getting this blood vessel damage and some of them not. And then they figured out that the ones at chest level, at waist level, didn't have the damage to their blood vessels, but the ones on the high shelf did have the blood vessel damage. And they puzzled about this for a while until they figured out that the lab assistant who was feeding the rabbits was a very compassionate young woman. And the rabbits at her level that she could reach into the cages, when she fed them, she took them out, she cuddled them, she talked to them and things like that. But she couldn't do that at the rabbits up high. So those she just fed. And so really the only difference was that the rabbits were cuddled. They were connected with. And even though they developed the high cholesterol, they did not develop the blood vessel damage. And so this really illustrates the importance of kindness, of compassion, of touch, of love, and how it can affect our overall health. And so this comes back. I'm gonna skip this one. I might come back to it, but social connection. There's lots and lots of studies. I was listening to NPR yesterday, today, I don't know, it doesn't matter. And we know that in our culture, loneliness is a huge problem, that many, especially older people, are very, very lonely. They're just not getting connection and their health is not good because of it. So we know that social connection, that social support helps people maintain a healthy weight. That's one of the reasons I love meeting with people from the plant-based community, that it helps me stay where I am on my healthy diet, and it also can help others. It helps control blood sugars. It improves cancer survival. You can look at many studies have been done. People who've been diagnosed with cancer enter support groups, and those people tend to live longer than those who don't. Decreases heart disease deaths. It decreases depression, improves PTSD symptoms, and improves overall mental health. And being a therapist for a long time, I have seen this time after time after time. It's the reason that Alcoholics Anonymous works, that people get this social support that can really change not only their mental health, but also their physical health. Because I hope one of the things you're taking away from this is that mental health and physical health aren't different. They're not different. They're the same. We have, our brains and our bodies and our psyches are all connected. So here's the farm. This is a couple of weeks ago. There's Pickles. And then Suve is the goat that Allison is cuddling. And this was the group where we got together, and I make people do this. I'm sort of the cruise director on Wednesday mornings. And so when I always make people get together for a picture, and then before we give the animals their treats. And so it's just a lot of fun. And so again, another example of social connection and how that can really help, certainly helps me. And as you can tell, our boots are pretty dirty. It's hard work out there. But beyond social connection is connection with ourselves. And that's why I really emphasize the mindfulness, the self-care, that we tend to get, we get lost in our thoughts. We're not mindful. We go about sort of on automatic during our days. But when we can come back to our body and ask it what it really needs, when we can give it a good amount of exercise, when we breathe, when we do yoga, yoga has actually been found out to be really beneficial for health, that we're connecting with ourselves. We're connecting with our deeper selves, with our appetites, with our muscles. And bodies respond when they feel taken care of. My daughter's one who's always pushed herself too far. And what I keep telling her as she's trying to learn, she's 48 now, to not push so hard, is that her body doesn't trust her quite yet. And also when I'm teaching yoga classes, people get yoga injuries because they're pushing too hard. If your body can trust you, that you're not going to push too hard, that you're going to push a little bit because we want to develop strength, we want to develop resilience, but you're not going to hurt it. Once our bodies can learn to trust us, then it's a lot easier. Then there's these other mindfulness practices. I love the concept of an awe walk, where you take a walk around the neighborhood, not just to take a walk, because you're going to try to get the last of your 10,000 steps in, but you're going to see something that's awesome, whether it's a feather that you find on the road or a beautiful rock, or maybe this time of year, the beautiful blossoms, that you just take some moments to be in awe and notice how beautiful the world is around you. It's a very healing, mindful practice. Of course, if you're up to it, to establish a meditation practice, it needn't be long. It could be 5 or 10 minutes. It could be 30 minutes or an hour, whatever fits your lifestyle, where you take the amount of time to just, the way we began at the beginning, just sit and be silent and come to be able to watch the thoughts and not be carried away by them. But just like the thought, you're a useless old woman, perhaps you can laugh at it rather than believe in it. And then to establish self-care routines that just feel good. That is similar to the going, you might have a bedtime routine, you might have a waking up routine. I get up every morning about 5:30, and especially if my cat wakes me up, and brush my teeth and make a cup of coffee and go and I sit in my meditation room for half an hour. And I have a window that I can look out through, and I've been watching spring arrive. And it's a beautiful time of day, just quiet, nothing going on. So those are ways to connect with oneself, learn about oneself. And the question earlier about IFS, learning those internal characters that maybe you have as well. And then having this relationship with something greater. And this is what happened to me. I already had a spiritual connection, but when I went vegan and realizing that I was defending against the guilt and what had been happening to animals, just a sort of blossoming that I felt a bigger connection with nature. I feel such a connection with the animals at the sanctuary, that they're animals, but they're just the sweetest things ever. They're so vulnerable. They're so sweet. And to really connect with them feels like it fills my heart. It feeds my heart. And people have different ways of talking about this. They may just want to connect with nature. They may use the word God. They may want to connect with God or what they call a higher power. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it, that there is this sense that we're connected with each other and with all of life. And many studies that look at people in religious communities, spiritual health, the other thing that you find is meaning and purpose. And while maybe I had meaning and purpose when I was teaching and doing therapy, I still have a meaning and purpose, even if it's only shoveling shit. And it's very meaningful activity. So this is Jamie's picture. This is Thanksgiving on the farm. This is, we set up a table and we bring treats for the turkeys. And here over in the left is Johnny Rose, and he's a big male turkey, and he ate a whole bowl of cranberries, which I thought was just quite wonderful. Somebody cooked some little pumpkins for the turkeys. I made them salad. They weren't so much into the salad, but they loved the berries. And this is what we do at Thanksgiving at the farms, is instead of killing and eating turkeys, we feed the turkeys. And it's really a beautiful time. And this is my favorite picture of all time, which shows sort of my connection. The big tall cow up there, that's Romeo. He's the world's tallest steer, and his brother Milo. The one who's kind of mooing at me is Charlie. And then there's Buster clear over at the left. And then Mama and Yabo, they're down below when we're feeding them, when we're giving them treats afterwards. And this just, to me, is just an illustration of what plant-based eating and this vegan lifestyle has given me. So that's the end. Oh my goodness, look at all these people. Are there any questions or comments? Oh, thanks, Meryl.
Thank
I
you again,
like it.
Pam. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead. I was just saying thank you. Go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, I like it that you feed the turkeys on Thanksgiving, because to me it seems more like you are thanking them for what their species has been going through for ever since we started
Yeah,
eating
really.
turkey at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's a nice turn of events.
I think it's a wonderful, it's just my favorite. I've had I guess I've only had 2 Thanksgivings at the farm, and they've been the best Thanksgivings of my life. It's cold, it's cold out there, and but it's just such a joy. And we take such great pride in setting up this really, really pretty table for them. So yeah, turnabout's fair play.
When you're
I
out
mean,
there, can you sense a difference in the demeanor of the farm animals there as opposed to other places that you may have visited?
I would say yes now. These that one, but I think one of the big differences is these animals know us. I mean, we'll have new volunteers coming in through and going out, but the animals, for instance, are much more friendly than they were 2 years ago when I started. They know who I am. They know I'm kind of the treat lady. We had one volunteer that we talked about treats, and she said, I don't want to be known as the treat lady. And I said, I do. uh, so, and I have heard, I don't know if there's any evidence on this, that animals kind of know from your smell whether you are a carnivore or not. But I don't know whether that's true or not. But these guys are all just kind of fun.
Well, we're mammals too. I think there's a good possibility that we're pretty much all up in our own stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was a wonderful
Yeah.
presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoyed it
Thanks.
very.
Thank you. I see my inner psychology teacher. She's still here. She shows up when she needs to, and she'll start telling stories. Sometimes it's hard to shut her up. So that's one of my IFS people, is my professor. And I love teaching. I really do.
People were asking how to,
Asking if they want to visit the farm on a Wednesday, how do they connect
Yeah.
with you?
If anybody wants to just come down, I'm there almost every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. I've taken Debbie down. So if anybody wants to ride down to the farm with me, you don't have to shovel shit, but if you want to come down for a couple of hours, feel free. Or if you want to come down any other time, I could probably set up a time with Misty that we could go down and just visit the animals if you're interested. Because I would love to introduce all these wonderful animals to people.
I put your email in the chat in case
Thank
someone
you.
wants to
Yeah.
get a hold of you. Yeah.
Mhm. I just saw that yawn, Marcia. Looks like you're ready for it. Anybody else? And maybe we're done. So yes, Arun, definitely send me an email if you want to come down to the farm. Let's see what we can work out. Maybe you too can become a Wednesday volunteer. They also do cleanups on Sunday morning. So if you work during the week and you can't come down on Wednesday mornings, they do cleanups at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings as well. And Misty, who owns the farm, is always looking for volunteers. So
I was out there once we had a planning meeting for the Eugene Vegan Fest out there last fall, and I went out there once. It was a lot of fun.
yeah,
Pam,
you too can.
how do they
What?
how do they support all that has to go on at the farm? It's expensive to feed.
It's really expensive. It's a shoestring operation. Misty, who owns the farm, she's married to Robert, and they have a couple of grown children now. I think Misty's probably around 50. She and her husband both work full time. So they have that income. They also, you can be a Patreon member. So I also give them 50 bucks a month. So she said they take in some money on Patreon. They try to do fundraisers. During the summer, we do what's called welcome walks. So at noon or 12:30 on Sundays, you can buy a ticket and come down and see the animals, and they can give you things to give them treats too. So you can come down for those welcome walks. So it's one of those, it's like all the farm sanctuaries, please give us money. Sponsor an animal, things like that, trying to raise money.
Well,
So
it takes a big village to raise
yeah.
and support a lot of animals.
Yeah, because these animals get sick. These animals, since I've been there, there have been 2 animals that have died, and they were my favorite. One was Russell, beautiful white alpaca, and the other was Darcy, who was a brown goat. and they die of old age. And we're about to lose a sheep, Gwendolyn, who's gotten very sick, and she's 17 though. So these animals do die, but they die of old age, and they die surrounded by love.
Very lucky. To
Yeah.
they're very
Mhm.
lucky to be there.
Mm-hmm. So I see a question in the chat from Beth about, oh, I'm sorry. So sorry your dad's on hospice. That is really hard. And I would say to Beth, there you are down in the right, in the far left. This is one of those times when I wouldn't worry about the sleep so much. I think being with your dad is probably going to give you much more meaning and purpose, and you'll look back on this time as being difficult, but also really, really meaningful. And to be with him, I think, is more important than worrying about your sleep right now. And that's a really intense time. I remember when my mother died, that it's an intense time spiritually, physically. So during this time, get as much sleep as you can, and do as much self-care as you can, and just know it's a really priceless time to be with someone who's dying. I hope that helps. Thanks. Okay.
All right. Guess we can end a
Thank
few
you so
minutes early.
much.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Good to
What's
see
coming-
everybody.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah.
What's coming
Yeah.
up next week?
Well,
It's
this
gonna
week is
be, the next week will be we have the Food for Life cooking demonstration on Friday, and then she's going to come on in a week and do kind of a Q&A, give some cooking tips and things like that, what she can kind of do without doing the cooking demonstration, because that's going to be on Friday. So next Tuesday, tune in for that. Food for Life
Okay.
instructor.
Hey,
It'd be fun sometime to have a recipe sharing. I make the best egg salad out of tofu. It's just amazing. I just found this new recipe. Be fun to have a recipe exchange at some point.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
You can
I
always
mean,
go on the
this-
Facebook group and post your
Yeah,
recipes.
I know, but I got mad at Zuckerberg and I dropped out of Facebook.
Oh, gotcha. That's the only time I use it is for our
Yeah.
Live Lifestyle Medicine Facebook group. I don't do anything else on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I just got so disgusted in a moment. Just withdrew from all of it. So, but we might think about that at some point, creating our own cookbook. Charlie's favorite recipes. Mine are really simple because I'm not much of a cook.
Simple's good.
Mhm.
That'd be a project for you, Pam. You can take that on. Make a
Okay.
cookbook for shared recipes from our classes.
From the group. That would be fun. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll take it on.
Yeah.
All right.
It could even be a fundraiser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, before we check out, can I ask Charlie and Scott an unrelated question?
Sure.
Is that okay? I have it's two questions really. The first question is, if your good cholesterol is a little low, is that a worry, and is there anything you can do about it? And the second question is mostly for Scott. Even though my weight has decreased in the last couple years of eating this way, my blood sugars are still a little too high. And I think I'm noticing that if I let them get too high, I can sense it internally. I can say, I know my blood sugars are too high right now. I'm wondering, it seems like I crave fat when that happens, and I don't want to be doing that. Does that happen to you? And do you just combat it by making sure to be very careful not to let that blood sugar get too high?
Before you chime in on the diabetes, I'm going to chime in on cholesterol. You're not going to get too low on your cholesterol level.
Even the good cholesterol?
Huh?
It's the good cholesterol that's too low.
Well, stop worrying about it. It's one
Okay.
factor in your overall life. Focus
Okay.
your attention on eating whole plant foods that are unprocessed. And if you're doing that to the best of your ability, you're going to have the best health. And not to worry, as your cholesterol level gets lower, your good cholesterol, the HDL, gets lower also. One way of thinking about it is the good cholesterol is like a garbage truck, taking away the bad effects of the LDL bad cholesterol. So if you don't have as much bad cholesterol, LDL or total cholesterol, you don't need as much HDL
Oh,
cholesterol.
thank you.
Okay.
That's
Now-
exactly what I needed to hear.
Okay. Well, that's why we're all here. Scott, take it away.
Yeah. And just to give you an example of that, the Tarahumara Indians in the Copper Canyon in Northwest Mexico that have no heart disease amongst their tribe, their average HDL good cholesterol is only 25, which is really
Wow.
bad, really low. But their bad cholesterol is less, around 50 or less than 50, so they don't have any heart disease. So it's just what Charlie said. They have really low cholesterol and really low bad cholesterol, so they don't need to have very much of the HDL around because they don't develop heart disease. And then for blood sugar, it's kind of defining what is a high blood sugar, what is too high, because it's a loaded question because there really isn't, what might be considered too high might be completely normal. So it's just a matter of maybe not. I would have to know what your exact numbers are to be able to speak to that, but knowing that if you're just having cravings, it's more just you're craving fatty foods because that's just the dopamine, the high calorie density, high sugar, high salt, high fat is the things that stimulate the midbrain and give you that dopamine surge. And so that might be more of a craving issue rather than a blood sugar issue, but again, it would have to see numbers and have a lot more information to speak to that further.
Would you say trust what you think about your own body?
Well, yeah, I mean, so just because people don't generally crave, potatoes and broccoli and beans and things like that in general. And then also just knowing, how are you feeling? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling excited? What's the feelings you're having associated with the fact that you're craving something that's fatty and something like that, rather than focusing on whether your blood sugar is 110 or 120, which would both be normal. So just I would kind of focus on that.
Thanks.
Okay, it's my bedtime.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you again. That was great.
Okay,
All
thanks
right, have a good
everyone.
night. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
See you
Again,
next week.
Pam. Take
Everybody.
care. Take care.
Night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Charlie,
Bye.
Scott.